Hello everyone, Ceri the Crafter here, that's Ceri the Crafter, and I'm here with a little project today. Now, brief explanation, I've injured my wrist, I've got a glove on because I'm going to be using paints and inks and I don't really want to get my wrist support covered in gunk. So, as anyone who follows me knows, or anyone who's received a swap or happy mail, I like to use what I call Arty Labels. So basically I just make up labels and I'll stick them just as a miniature piece of art on maybe the back of an envelope, maybe on the back of my planner. I might put them on the corner of a postcard. Sometimes I'll add them to my collage pieces. As you can see, I have a stack of them. Actually, that reminds me. Remind me later to explain. I'll explain it now because I'll forget later. If you do this process, sometimes you'll find that the labels tend to lose a lot of their sticky. I think that's probably because they get wet on one side, not the other. I always use a glue stick. I use this brand to stick my labels down anyway, so that never bothers me. So if you find they start peeling up, don't worry about it. So as you can see, I'm just doing a little bit of a flick through so you can see the variety that I actually do. Now, a while ago, and if I can find the original video I did, which is a couple of years ago now, I'll put it in the description box, but don't hold me to that because I'm not sure I'm going to be able to find it. And I explained that I make my labels from brayer off sheets from doing my gel printing. Now, I did have one or two requests saying, Ceri, if I don't have a gel plate and I don't have a brayer, how can I do it? And I went, right, let's address that now. So I thought, right, good opportunity. I want to make up some more labels as well. Not because obviously I don't need to make a huge amount of labels, but I love using them and I like having a variety of colours. So let's pop those back in there. So I'm going to show you how I would do it if I wasn't someone who had a gel plate and a brayer. A brayer just being a roller, a gel plate being something you do mixed media gel prints on or mono printing on. So look, I even use, can you see, even use the labels on my boxes. So first things first, I buy sheets of labels. These just happen to be Avery labels. How many's on here? As you can see the line here is 21 on here. Actually, it's 21 on both of them. That's fine. Now, I don't usually buy my labels at full cost. What I do is whenever I'm in a stationery store, I'll check out the clearance aisle. There's usually a box of labels in there and I just pick them up. Or if I go to a charity shop or a Goodwill shop or a thrift shop, sometimes they have a small section where they have partly used boxes of stuff. Or maybe if you've got a friend who works in an office and the office is closing down or clearing out old stock, or even an old shop that may be getting rid of stuff, just keep your eye open. You'd be surprised how often you'll come across labels. So I'm going to do 2 sheets of labels today. First thing I want to do is I'm going to put down something that's going to keep my work surface not absolutely pristine. I don't do pristine, well, not with this mat anyway. Hopefully that's all in shot. I've got a ceramic tile with me purely because that's the way I tend to work with paints and stuff. I've had this ceramic tile for years. It's wipeable, washable. I can do most mediums on it, and even if it's dried on, I just scrape it off. So I'm going to go through the whole process. I'm going to make 2 sheets up as I go, and hopefully this will help anyone out there who likes how you're doing it. Now, what I would say is when you choose paints to do this with, you can use up old paints, you can use up new paints. You could have this close to you so that when you're working, if you have spare paints, you can build up these over time. I would say choose colours that work well together. Maybe stick with the warm family, stick with the cool family, stick with complementaries. If it's pleasing to your eye, it's probably going to be pleasing to someone else's. So I've chosen turquoise by Arteza. I've got orange iridescent by DYNA, which is a Pueblo brand. I've got pale lemon by Winter & Newton, and I've got red, a wine red by Arteza, and I pulled out some white as well. So those are just the colours, but as I said, the more colours you get on there, just as long as they don't get muddy, then you're okay. And if you're building them over time, like you always have it on your desk when you're painting and you use it to clean up your spare paints, then if the paint below is dry, it's hardly going to get muddy if you actually add a new layer to it. So anyone who knows me knows I use damp cloths instead of baby wipes, just as a clean-up thing. it's me trying to do my little bit to help the planet out. But I've always said, if there's a job that only a baby wipe can do, then I'll use a baby wipe. I'm using a baby wipe. I am only using one baby wipe, and there are some clever people out there who, once you've used a baby wipe and let it dry, you can use it as a textural element. I think you could probably do this with a slightly damp cloth. I just never have. So I'm going to start with my lightest colour, not the white, but the lightest colour. Oh, that paint stuck down. And I'm just going to get this on here. Now, this is probably not going to be new to anyone. You probably are going to go, oh, I've seen that done before. Yeah, you have. And if you watch one of my videos, you've probably seen me do it as well. So I'm just going to come in and I'm going to colour in areas of these labels. The reason I make videos like this is because there's always a newbie somewhere. There's always someone who hasn't seen something done before. And I know when I first started out, obviously I didn't know a lot of stuff. And I was always very grateful if people who were YouTube influencers would do things for beginners, because I think that's how we all learn. I know certainly how I learned was by watching other people do stuff. So I've got down my palest colour. I'm going to immediately go to the orange. This is an iridescent, so it's going to have a bit of a shine to it. I'm going to pick it up on the same section. I'm going to come in. Now, I tend to work, something stuck to me. I tend to work in vertical and horizontal lines. Not necessary, completely up to you. It's just my brain is wired that I like for horizontal and verticals. So just coming in. If you're someone who does art journaling, you'll recognize this technique because you may even have done this doing backgrounds yourself on your art journal pages. I know I certainly have. Let's take a little bit down there. Right, now I'm going to go to another colour. I'm going to leave that on there because once the camera gets turned off, I will use that up on maybe another sheet of sticky labels or something. So I've turned it around, so I'm not going to add the next colour to the orange because I'll definitely make it brown. So I'm going to bring in the turquoise, another place on my tile, pick up, and I'm going to come in and capture some of the areas that are still white. I don't want to rub too hard if it's on top of the orange because it will turn it into a brown. So just knowing certain things is something to be aware of. Just be aware of mixing the colours on the paper. Now, if I was doing this without the camera, I would have built these up over a period of a couple of days while I was doing other projects. So as I said previously, it would have dried in between, and dry paints are not going to mix up to make mud, whereas wet paints will. Right, that's that bit. Now I've got one more colour to come in here, and I want to use that colour a little bit sparingly because it's a dark colour, and what I want to do is add a little bit of drama into this. Now I don't mind that there's, if you see here, you can see the brush marks, wet white marks, should we call them. Getting low on that colour, I think. Right, I've only got a really little bit of that because I just want to add little bits of it here and there. Again, for me, I'm adding verticals and horizontals. Now, something to remind you here of is if you want to do this, and do have fun doing this, you're not making an entire coherent pattern. You're actually making backgrounds that in this instance are only really small. They're only that big. So I tried to do little bits here and there across all of the pages. But I'm not looking for absolutely perfect because there's no need to. Something else I will say, right, this can go to be dried now. So this could then be used for something else in the future. Not sure. I'll put it to one side. It could even become part of a journal cover. So just going to wipe up this little bit of the colour that's not the orange. There's too much orange on there to wipe it up. I will clean that area up. So another thing to do too, guys, is if you don't have labels, and you don't have to have labels, I like using recycled labels purely because they're already cut to the right dimensions. All I've got to do is peel them off and put some glue on, stick them down. You could do this with just sheets of paper and then cut it up into label sizes of your choice, or even use your punches to cut out shapes, and then you've made your own labels. Okay, just be aware that it doesn't have to be sticky labels. Let's move the wet wipes out of the way. Now, one of the next things I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with a sponge. This was a bit of packaging sponge, and I'm going to use some of that white paint that I had. Pop that down. I'll be using a bit more of that later anyway. And I'm just going to get a bit of this on my sponge, and I'm going to come over, and I'm just going to, can you see that? Maybe. I'm just going to come in and put slight areas where I'm blending pieces through. Now you may say, well, why didn't you do it lighter in the first place? Because I find it easier to do this. Also, it adds variety to the whole thing. Because we're going to be doing lots of other things on top of this. So I've got that. Let's stick a little bit over there. So just know that this is just, it's like making a masterboard. Now, my next step is I'm going to bring in a stencil. Now, it isn't one of my stencils. This is actually one of PM Artist Studio stencils. Ooh, and if I knew the name, I'd be very good. Ooh, I will say something like Artist Circles. Let's see if I can find it really quickly in my folder. I've just got my folder over here a second. I've got a feeling I can find this quite quickly. Talk about not being prepared. I should have been more prepared. Oh, it's Art Deco Circles. There you go. It's called Art Deco Circles by PM Artist Studio. If you like using stencils, they have a wide variety of stencils and masks. I will put the link to PM Artist Studio in the box below. And also, I will try to remember I can give you a discount code as well. And what I'll do is, I'll put the discount code in the description box, and then at least you'll know where to find it. Okay, you will need to add the discount code at checkout. For any orders over $35, you will end up with 10% extra off your order. It's good when it's international because that breaks the shipping down a bit. So I've just chosen a stencil that's got a small pattern to it. So I'm going to come in and pick up some of that white, and it's just going to dab this down. I'm just using areas, and I tend to put the white over darker areas because you'll see it better, won't you? Now you could do the reverse. You could put darker dots over lighter areas. I just need to pull out some more of that paint. I might actually use a bit of the orange, actually seeing it down here. We'll see. Right. Again, I'm dabbing on, dabbing off, so there's not a huge amount of paint on my sponge. Let's swap that one over to that side. So I'm trying to work a bit one-handedly here. Not the easiest of things. So I'll be so glad when my wrist is repaired. It's a bit inhibiting on my artwork, but I didn't break it, so I'm okay with that. So just bring it, so you can see I'm just adding stuff, building that background up, being totally mixed media about it. And as we've got some of this orange on the go, let's pull some of that orange in, because why not? Actually, I quite like that. Now, these are not labels I would normally write anything on top of, if that makes sense. When I use these labels, they are purely used as maybe just a small piece of art on the back of an envelope, or maybe a focal point on a journal card or something, anything like that. I just tend to use them where I use them. Right, that's that done. Sponge can go to one side. I may use it later. I'm just going to quickly use a damp cloth just to wipe the excess off my stencil. Now, I could have cleaned the stencil off onto yet another sheet of labels, but I'm a little limited on space here, and I don't always have the facility to have areas around me where I can keep adding stuff to stuff and stuff and stuff. So And also I'm trying to make sure I give the stuff that's on the labels a little bit of time to dry. Let's take that off that mat before it totally dries. So let's put that to one side. So as you can see, we've got the basis of labels. Okay, now they always look a little bit over the top when you've got them en masse like this, but the more stuff you put on them, the further into the background other things will go. Now I can come in and add more white if I wanted, so I want to knock something back, but I'm not going to. I quite like the direction they're going in. I like my labels to be quite bright. Now I want to add a little more detail on here, and I want to add some circles. So what I've done is, you're probably familiar with these. These are those tubes of Pringles, or you can get, there's other brands now that come in tubes like Crisps or Snacks. So I've just taken one of the plastic lids, cut a little bit so I can actually hold it, just the tab, and I use it for mark making. So I'm going to come in, and I think I want to put some yellow on there, because the greens and teals lend themselves to yellow. Right, I've got some yellow cadmium hue here, which I know is a really knock your socks off yellow. So, just put a bit on the surface. And I've done that because I want to just turn this around, dipping this into it so that I get an even coating on the edge. Now, as with everything, we are not looking for perfect, guys. We are just looking for bits of interest. Hopefully the clicking isn't driving you nuts. Right, that can go to one side. I should just wipe that off there, just to sort the build up on it. Now I do have more paint over here. I can mop that up with anything I like. I could use paper, I could use more labels. I'm just going to use a bit of tissue paper here just to clean this up so I don't waste the paper. These bits of tissue paper get used in my collage work. So as you can see, I've just turned a bit of tissue paper into something a little more interesting bit of tissue paper. And just so I don't put my hand in it, the excess needs a bit of a clean up. Right, I think that's all of the messy stuff pretty much done. What I want to do now is I need to wait a few minutes for this to actually dry. So I'm going to give you 2 seconds rest. I'll be back in after 2 seconds to actually move on to the next stage. But I want to let this dry just a bit because those are quite thick bits of paint I put down there. And also I can now get rid of my glove because I no longer need the glove because we're going on to more clean arty bits. Okay, see you in 2 seconds, guys. So here we are back again. They're pretty much dry. It's only been about 10 minutes. It's getting really cloudy and dark out there. Looks like it's going to be a storm this evening, or this afternoon at least. So hopefully, let's move this up a bit more. So hopefully it's not going to get too dark for filming. So my next stage now is I want to put some visual texture into the next layer on this. So one of the next things I reach for is some script. So by script, I just use a stamp block. And I've got some generic script pieces here, cling stamps. Now, please don't ask me where I get my stamps, because what I tend to do is, other than it being a named brand like Tim Holtz or something where it's better to keep it in its packaging, I tend to break my stamps down and put them into groups like words will be words, butterflies will be butterflies, fish will be fish, and I get rid of the packaging because, to be honest with you, I only keep stamps that I want. So say I have a collection of stamps and I only like 3 or 4 of them. The rest from that collection, I'll just put them as a gift to someone, or I'll send them out as part of Happy Mail, or they'll go to a thrift or a charity store. I'm not going to give space to things in my craft room that I'm never going to use. That's just my way of doing it. So I'm going to use archival. I found archival is best. Now, for this process, now you're going to have to remember that you're stamping onto paint. It's never going to give you a perfect impression. And do we care if it's imperfect impression? No, actually we don't. Just bring those in. Now I tend to stamp the pad onto the stamp, not the other way round. I find I get a better inking this way. If I get over the right way up, it's a good idea. And I'm just going to come in and I'm going to stamp areas. Now I will lift this up after each stage so you can actually see what we've done, just so that it gives you some idea of what's going on the page. Now, I am not stamping all over the place. I'm pretty much stamping areas. So I tend to go in threes, to be honest. I know that's a bit predictable, but as you can see, the stamping is there, really quite nice, a little bit of subtle interest to draw you in. So I tend to do 3 of the text, and I tend to look for areas that have got nothing in them or very little in them. If I do it the right way, it's getting really, really dark out there. Yeah, here comes the rain, guys. Here comes the rain. And for once, I don't have washing on the line. How amazing is that? So I pop that one in there. I quite like... So I'm trying to see how I can do this. If I just overlap these, I'll put one across here. And that way I can stamp both sets at the same time. Because I don't want to get my grey mat dirty. It's dirty enough as it is. So, there you go. And lift that off there. Right, so that's this one done. Have I got something to stamp this off on? Where's my stamp pad? So that's it with the script. Now what I would say, you can get a bit carried away with this and you end up putting so much stamping work onto it that it ends up as a complete mess. So just be aware that, just know when to stop is what I'm trying to say. So I'm now going to pull out some butterflies. I could be doing sea creatures, I could be doing mystical animals, I could be doing flowers, I could do anything. But just for speed, I'm going to do butterflies on this one. Now I've got quite a big expanse of a stamp here. So just because I like to work, I don't want to say commercially, but I suppose some would view it as commercially, I tend to put a couple of stamps on at the same time. That little one down there. And then to line them up a little bit better. Not that they need lining up, but that way I can stamp in one piece, and I know because the labels I'm creating are quite small, I'll probably catch areas of I'm not going to struggle with that. I'll catch different areas of this, so I will come in again, stamping out. We know we're not going to get perfect stamps. In fact, it's a benefit not to get a perfect stamp, because it looks more vintage, more oldie-worldy. See, I don't mind that it's not perfect. You could put stamping foam underneath to stamp upon if you really were picky and wanted to have perfect stamps. I'm not that guy. I don't need perfect. I'm going to repeat on here. I very rarely do one sheet of stamps, one sheet of labels. I usually do 2 or 3 at a time, purely because I'm making labels. I might as well be making labels. And it's not as if it's taking up a lot of space in my storage. I've got a box dedicated for this sort of thing, and that's, as long as they stay within there, I'm fine. If there's anything that I use as far as controlling the amount of supplies I have in my art room, it's usually controlled by the space they're stored in. So if the space they're being stored in gets full, guess what? I don't buy any more until I've used it up. Let's just take these off here. Again, these are just butterflies from several different kits that I've had over the time, or sets of butterflies, and I don't tend to worry about that. I will also bring in a couple of wooden block stamps. Anything that's of interest, if I've got any tip for you as far as stamps go, try to find stamps that are reasonably small, because remember, these are only, how big are these? It should say on here. 63.5 millimeters by 38.1 millimeters. There you go. That's how big these are. And I'll just come in and I'll put pieces where the other stamping isn't, and I don't mind vertical. Let's put in this other one. I don't mind them overlapping. That creates even more interest. So that's those two on there, and then I'll take a look and go, does this need anything else? So I actually think I'd like to put some wording on here. Now, I did have, I can't remember which one it's in. I did have a Tim Holtz one here that I was using the other day. Tim Holtz. There you go. This Papillon CMS 106 is the set. I believe this is what the set looks like in total. I find that I store my stuff in these envelopes, so if it doesn't fit in, I have to cut it in half, and I'm okay with cutting it in half. Right, where's that block gone? I think I want to come in, and I quite like this wording down here. Now, I could have done that as a whole strip and stamped it if I wanted as well, but guess what? I didn't. So now I'm stamping in black. You can stamp in any colour you choose that makes you happy. And I would say that sometimes if I'm doing a subtle background, I will very often use, like I would use red, or I would use green, or I would use teal, something like that. So I'm just going to come into areas now. I'm not sort of looking for anything. I'm going by instinct. If an area looks slightly bare, I will pop something into it. Also, if like here, this butterfly didn't stamp perfectly well, guess what? If I put a word there, all of a sudden it doesn't look like it was not stamped well. I think I just want one more on each of these pages, and it's pretty much done. Let's go back there. It's on that page. Also, numbers is a really good one to use on these as well, although I don't have any number stamps out at the moment, and I don't want to spend all day doing this because then the video gets quite boring. Let's put that to one side. So that's my two labels of stamps. So let's have a quick close-up look. We'll have another look in a minute. But as you can see, now this looks like quite a hot mess. Although what I would say is my next stage is something that really helps me, is I peel the backing off from the edging. Now I want to make sure that so I'm just trying to peel this and not peel up the labels. The labels are slightly damp still. I would normally have let them fully dried. So by taking this off, it makes me view them a lot more like the labels they're going to be. Okay, so then if I'm pulling one of these off, so just pull this one off here. So if I use this as a label on something, I've a really cute little element. Stick that back down there. I know it'll never stick perfectly, but it's back down there anyway. So this is how I do them, guys, and that's how I would do them if I don't have a gel plate or I don't have a brayer off. You don't even need to use a wet wipe. So say you had a sheet of these labels while you were doing watercolours or while you're doing paint work or ink work, because I've done this in acrylics. You could do ink, you could do water, you could do any of watercolours, you could do crayons even. Just be aware that these labels are not meant to be painted on, so if you get them really soaking wet, I'm not sure where they go from there. So again, there you go, sheet of labels. So hopefully you enjoyed that, guys. That was just a quick tutorial. As I said, it was a bit of a request because someone asked me how I do it when I don't have the brayer which I used before. This is how I do it. So I'm going to say goodbye now. Have fun with this. Remember, you don't need sticky labels. I could have done this on just a sheet of paper and then cut it up and then just use those pieces. I probably would have rounded my corners with a round punch purely so that it look more like a label. But you could easily do this with regular paper. I just like using label paper because it's out there. It's relatively cheap when you find it in a thrift store, and it means they're already cut up. I can just peel them off and stick them on. So before I say goodbye, one more thing. I'll put this in the description box as well. But if you type in Ceri Fan 10, exactly as you see it here, on the PM Artist website at checkout, if your order is over $35, then this will get you 10% off your entire order, which that makes a difference when you're international and you want to bring the shipping cost down. So have a good time with that, guys. Enjoy. I'm Ceri the Crafter. That's Ceri the Crafter. Until next time. Bye-bye now.